I work and live on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, so just wanted to acknowledge that and to acknowledge any First Nations people maybe in the room today. So, just to start, backing up already. Interesting. There's, am I where I want to be? Yes. Okay. So just to start, a few definitions. Gender and sexual orientation are often confused, but they're distinct and separate concepts. Gender is the range of characteristics that society identifies as masculine or as feminine. Gender identity is a person's internal view of their gender, their sense of themselves as a gendered person. A person whose gender identity matches the sex they were presumed to be at birth is called a cisgender person, and gender diversity includes everyone else. Binary gender, or the gender binary, is a classification system that includes only males and females. Many societies, including Australia, assume a gender binary, but not everyone identifies as fitting in that binary. Again, gender is independent of sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is how you experience your romantic and sexual feelings. It's at this point that I experience the joy of realizing my notes have slid off the bottom of the slide and I don't know how to get to them. This is very exciting. Well, we're just going to have to go ahead and wing it and hope that I get to the points that are gone. Sexual orientation has multiple dimensions, the most important of which are identity, attraction, and behavior. Identity is who you feel you are. Who you see yourself as being, as I said. Attraction is who you're drawn to. And behavior, that's pretty self-explanatory. It's how you act on your sexual feelings, and for our purposes, it's with other people. So keeping these definitions in mind, sexuality diverse people have worse mental health than heterosexual people across the board, with higher rates of depression, anxiety, self-harm, and thoughts of suicide. Sexuality diverse young people are 2 to 4 times more likely than heterosexual ones to attempt suicide. Sexuality diverse people are more likely to take sexual risks, with higher rates of sexually transmitted infections and unplanned pregnancy, and they're more likely to engage in substance use. And all of these disparities are even more pronounced for gender diverse people. We know that a major cause of these disparities is stigma, discrimination, and exclusion, which affect SGD people from, that's what we're going to call them for reasons of brevity, SGD people from early life. SGD people experience minority stress, which refers to the whole cluster of things that make it difficult to live as a minority person. In the case of SGD people, this includes stigma itself, the distress at needing to hide one's sexual orientation or gender diversity or gender identity, and the fear of discrimination, rejection, or violence. There's a very serious lack of population-based data in Australia about SGD people. This includes even as basic a thing as how many young people are SGD. Even the Young Lives Matter survey, which was mentioned a little earlier, Australia's premier survey of mental health in young people, doesn't collect sexuality and gender diversity data. We estimate that as many as 300,000 young Australians identify as sexuality or gender diverse, but we don't know for sure. That said, the Raine study has collected data about gender identity and sexual orientation since Generation 2 were teenagers. In the most recent follow-up at age 27, 10 people, or just under 1%, were gender diverse. In the same follow-up, we found that females and males were about equally likely to report being something other than heterosexual, with about 13% of females and 9% of males reporting a diverse sexual identity. Female participants were more likely to report that they identified as bisexual and less likely to identify as gay or lesbian than males. Some of the other sexual identities people shared with us were pansexual, asexual, bicurious, and queer. I'm sorry, I know this is numbers, and numbers are scary and bad, but here you see the reports of sexual attraction. Overall, about 34% of females versus 14% of males reported diverse sexual attraction. Also note how rare it is to report never being attracted to anyone at all. I'm going to pause, and I cut this out of my talk because I thought I would be held to time, but I'm also vaguely hoping I get away with it now that I'm officially senior. Note that this is framed within that gender binary I was talking about. There's no option to talk about being attracted to people who aren't male or female, but who consider themselves non-binary. And here we come to behavior. And again, numbers, ew. To keep this table from being totally overwhelming, I cut out all the missings, but it was about 5 to 7%. Note that it's much more common to have never had a sexual partner than to have never, as we saw in the previous slide, have experienced sexual attraction. So that's why we think about these dimensions, right, is because they're variable. And again, we see the same pattern as before with female participants more likely than male to report behavior with their own gender. And again, we see that females are more likely than males to have engaged in bisexual and less likely exclusively same gender behavior. So summing up, about 0.9% gender diverse people, and taking all of the dimensions together, 38% of females and 17% of males in Raine fall under the sexuality diversity umbrella. Describing the distribution of SGD people in Raine Gen 2 is just the beginning of our work. This is the good part. This is Sophia Garlick-Bach. She's a PhD student with me and Rachel. Rachel's over there. Hi, Rachel. She's a PhD student at Sydney Uni who's using data from Raine and other studies to look at co-occurrence and mental health experiences and substance use in SGD young people. I won't get into too much detail on that because I'm running low on time. Just to talk a little bit more, Rachel and I have also applied for funding for a larger project looking at trajectories to health and well-being among SGD young people. We'll use existing and new questionnaire data to undertake new statistical analyses with our biostatistician, Sarita, there she is in front of the Sydney Harbour Bridge, to look at the impact in adulthood of minority stress. We're working very closely with ASH and the Mental Health SIG on this. We'll also look at the protective role of health and developmental assets, for example, family functioning, so having a really functional family and having social support, having high self-esteem and self-efficacy, positive school environments, and economic advantage to try to get a much fuller picture of what's going on with mitigating minority stress. And we're also going to, we've applied for funding for a qualitative study led by Kristen Davies, who isn't able to be here today, but that study will use in-depth interviews with both cisgender heterosexual and SGD Raine Gen 2 participants to try to find out more about development of sexuality and gender and the role of assets and adversities in shaping those experiences. So our goal here is to get a deeper, more nuanced understanding of the lived experience of SGD people. So just touching on the project team, as I said, we work closely with a number of people to get this work done. Robert is over there sitting with Rachel. Without these people, nothing gets done. And I can tell you all about all of them, but I'm out of time. And as always, thanks, participants. Without you, we're nothing. So dead in the water. So thank you.